So, so hopping straight into it, the first thing that we wanted to ask today is, okay, what is wealth? All of us have a picture when we think of somebody who's wealthy or we think about wealth, like what comes to mind? And if you want to, feel free to put some things in the chat. I know for me growing up, anytime I heard the word wealth, I always picture kind of like a castle, or a mansion. I think about there are people out there that own islands, and those are the things that come to me. So a lot of times, and if you're like me, you're thinking about the things that wealth provides, not necessarily what is the wealth. So I thought it'd be good to take a quick snapshot of, okay, if we look at the definition of plentiful supplies of a particular resource, okay? And then let's say we're at our jobs, we have our income. So let's say this bucket is our income. We have what we're spending, and then we have what's left, right? We call that the surplus. What wealth building is taking our surplus and saving that over longer periods of time. That is what wealth is. Oftentimes, in a book that I like to also reference is if you haven't read The Psychology of Money, uh, it's a great pickup because what it talks about is the difference between being rich and being wealthy. Rich by definition means that the amount we can spend. Okay. So it's like how much of our income can we actually use to go purchase things? That's what it means to be rich. But wealth by definition is what are we not spending? So um, I like to look at this over time and just kind of give a breakdown like what is happening in our lives, right? That causes us to not be able to start getting into wealth building. You're not crazy. You're not necessarily making a mistake. I think a lot of times, like a lot of us, we're getting into work. And again, kind of like what Jonathan said, we may be too afraid to ask what are the right steps to do, right? I can tell you growing up, I don't know if your parents were like mine, but we didn't talk about money, right? It wasn't asking my parents, how much money do you make? How much do you have saved? Right? It was just, hey, we put that to the side. And you got a roof over your head and clothes on your back. You're okay. So money is what I like to say is also, it sometimes can be an intimate topic, right? Just because it's a little bit of like kind of getting, it's kind of almost like getting naked, to an extent, you're kind of showing your bruises or your scars, or you're showing your wins and your losses. So over the years, what I've seen is those that build wealth well, year one, they're putting their surplus away. Year two, year three, year four, year five, year six, and then they're just doing that all throughout the years. But what sometimes can happen is in year one, year two, like things are going good, fine, but then maybe you get married, maybe you switch jobs, maybe there's a layoff, maybe the company, like there's an adjustment, and then there's no plan attached to our surplus. We don't have like we know we have money left over, but we don't know what to do with it. So what ends up happening? It sits in our checking account, and then we end up spending it, right? And that's just human nature. So I just want to let everybody know, like that's you're not crazy. Like life is just happening. So the three things that we're going to walk through today, and these are the things that I want to make sure you guys walk out of this call with, is an understanding of what are the tools there available for you. Okay. And we're going to walk through some common questions that I get in prospective meetings that I think pretty much land with everybody. So, what are the tools out there? How do we use these tools to implement the systems of wealth building? That way, we're not always dependent upon our willpower. And then mentally, what is the perspective or mental changes we need to make in order to sustain those changes? Okay. So the first tool that we want to start using is we need a tool to actually figure out what is our goal, right? Why are we doing this? And I like to use three questions. If you've never done this before, is we need to ask the question, where are we today? And you can see that here on this barbell. Where are we today? Then we need to ask our questions, where do we want to go? And then the gap in between is going to be, how do we get there? But oftentimes, and I sometimes I work with like high school youth, and just trying to help them get to understand like, hey, what is college like? Like, what are goals like? But that's usually the hardest part, is getting them to think a little bit ahead, right? Of like, okay, how do I get past? Like, I go from thinking week to week, day to day, month to month, to now I got to ask a question about, where do I want to be 3 years from now, 5 years from now, 10, 20, right? And once we start throwing those objectives out there, trying to get them to use their vision, right? Sight without your eyes. That's when we can start getting into setting some goals. So, starting with that first question, where are we today? How many of us, and feel free to raise your hands, feel like budgeting is like a harsh word? Sometimes I even cringe. I'm an advisor, and it's like, okay, we need to go look at the budget, and it's like nobody wants to go look at a budget. Like we may want to know, we might want to know the things that a budget provides, but it's almost like a painful word now because of how much is being used. So, what I'd like to introduce is, instead of using the word budget, what we're really looking for is cash flow curiosity. We just want to know, where is my money going? Right? I'm just wondering. All right. Let's turn it more into a curiosity thing rather than something that you kind of feel like I gotta have my CPA, license to go and do. Right. Budgeting is really just going to be about understanding, what are we doing with our money, to uncover what are the things that we're saying are valuable to us. Okay. So we're asking ourselves the questions, where are we today? Where do we want to be? Starting with that first question, we need to understand, where are we today? Instead of using that word budgeting, we're looking for some curiosity around, where is our money, where are our funds going to? Then once we understand where our funds going to, and we start asking ourselves, where do we want to be? Now we're establishing a goal, and we're all going to have different goals. You're going to have short-term goals, you're going to have intermediate goals, and you're going to have long-term goals. And this is something I like to draw up for clients, because they're oftentimes they this question may come up. Hey, Derek, like, I want to buy a house, or I'm looking at buying a new house, but I don't know, like, what should I do with the money in the meantime? Meanwhile, you may read books, or you may watch TV, or you might see social security, I mean, excuse me, on social media, that are talking about 10-year holds, right? About your 401k or your Roth or your IRA. But based on your goal, I like to break them down like, hey, if you need this money within 1 to 5 years, liquidity is really the biggest thing that we're after. Okay. So that's going to look like cash, CDs at the bank, high yield savings, money market accounts. If you got kids, or there's somebody that maybe have, like, that you have medical expenses each year, the HSA for your company is a great place to park some money. The funny thing about this slide is, oftentimes the 1 to 5 year and the 10 year get taken care of. Why? It's usually because we know we need a little bit of cash, but then you get into your employer, or maybe you establish a 401k plan, and you're putting in your company match. Okay. This 5 to 10 year window, it's usually centered around income. So oftentimes, from clients we work with, it's usually a conversation about, how do we diversify our income streams, or how do we expedite getting to what I like to call work optionality, choosing when and where we want to work, or if we want to work at home. This 5 to 10 year bucket, almost, for some of our clients, we call it an opportunity fund, where we may be looking at brokerage accounts, you may be looking at real estate, 529 plans. If you have kids, are also another space for where these funds can go. And then for some people, it may be also looking at alternative investments where you might be looking at like private equity or venture capital. But that's where that 5 to 10 year bucket, it's money that we don't necessarily want locked up for, 10, 20 years or for retirement, but we want to have access to it, but we also want it to grow, right? Because we don't need it in 1 to 5 years. That's where this 5 to 10 year kind of tranche comes from. And then your 10 year bucket, kind of like I touched on briefly, that's going to be more like your long term. You're looking at your retirement. So that's going to be your 401k, your Roth, your traditional IRAs, and some people use insurance products. But I like to think that this is a good way to start looking at your once you get your goals established, where to park your dollars. The next thing is what's the order, right? So now we have our goals, and let's say our goal is to buy a house, but we also have all these thoughts in our heads like, well, I know I should be saving for retirement. I know I should be, I know I should have my life insurance. I know I need to do wills and trust, right? All those things are also there in your brain, in your mind. So what's the order that we could go about doing this? So I like to draw this pyramid, and we really have three phases. One is wealth preservation, the second is wealth creation, and then the third is wealth distribution. Wealth preservation is going to look like first we need to understand what's going on with our cash flow. We need to automate those savings. I like to throw in some basic estate planning documents. The only reason why I do that is because I've had experiences where people have uh, had an unforeseen illness, right? Like I had a client get diagnosed with stage 4 brain cancer, and he was like 34, and we needed those estate planning documents. It's not the wills or the trusts. It's more like advanced medical directives, power of attorney. Those documents are things that will be needed for your family in the event like an unforeseen illness were to come. 3 to 6 months of savings. That's, I think that's always a requirement. That I call that the cornerstone of our financial picture. And then you got the term life and disability insurance. Those are things that you can get through your employer. But I'm gonna highlight this 3 to 6 months of savings because that's how much I think it's important. I have oftentimes had clients come in and let's say they're super aggressive on debt reduction. They're like, Derrick, I can't stand this debt. Like, I don't care what I got to do. I'm throwing everything at it. We got to get out of it. And I think that that's good to a point, but we don't want to skip the process, right? But the reason why is oftentimes we have to look at the way life happens. Life isn't like a straight line; it ebbs and flows. So what happens if, let's say, we got 1,000 or five, X amount of dollars in our savings account? In this scenario, let's just say it's $1,000 in our savings account, but then we're dumping every other dollar into our debt reduction. Okay. Well, what happens when the car catches a flat, or the transmission goes out, or our roof has a leak and we got to repair the roof, or our AC unit goes out at our house? Those are all things that are probably more expensive than $1,000, and we're trying to change that perception from using our debt as our savings account to an extent, right? So when those things happen, now our debt, our credit cards, our loans, like that is our savings. That's the only way we're going to be able to pay for that. So that's the reason why I like to emphasize, let's make sure we get our cash situated as far as our 3 to 6 months of saving. We can still go ahead and do debt reduction, but maybe let's make sure we get to 3 to 6 months. Then after that, let's throw everything at it. In the wealth creation stage. And then the third, wealth distribution, that's where we're looking at, a lot of times, I call it retirement income planning, or you're looking at estate planning and gifting, where you've accumulated this wealth, but we don't know how to unwind it. We don't know how to make this. We're going from receiving income from our employer to now we're going to need to create income from the money that we saved. How do we go about doing that? And then how do we pass those assets along tax efficiently? Okay. So that's the order that we like to coach. Getting into the systems. Okay. When we're looking at the systems, I like to say we want to start with paying attention. From paying attention, we find the money, we automate the savings, and then we repeat. Okay. So practically, what does this look like? When we say pay attention, that's going to be us, right? Our cash flow curiosity. But a lot of times, what we're going to need to do is schedule that for with ourselves. Okay, if we're doing this on our own, we might need to go ahead and put on the calendar. Once a quarter, we're going to set aside an hour to actually look at where our money's going and are we on track for our goals. Okay. After that, we find the money. We got tax season coming up, right? You might be getting a tax return. You might be getting a annual raise, right? Like those are times where we're finding money. Okay. After we find that money, let's automate those savings. Okay. And I'm not saying don't have fun with your money, okay? Like have fun with it, but let's automate maybe a portion of it. Is it 10, 20% of it, right? What's the amount that we can put on autopilot that has us again taking that surplus, which is the wealth, and putting it to the side. And then we repeat. If you're working at a company or you're a business owner, all of us have systems, right? We have technology. We might be using a CRM. We might be using some type of internal software at our company that we log into that maybe holds the task that we need to complete, right? So we have, for companies, you have to like a tech stack that's there. Okay. If we imagined our lives, our finances as a company, what are the tech stacks that we're using, right? What are the things that in the systems and processes that we have in place? So what I like to start with is by having some budgeting awareness, right? So using apps like Monarch or Copilot, there are plenty of budgeting tools out there. I will tell you, I like Monarch. That's one I don't, there's no agreement with them or anything, but I like the way that they use their platform. But linking those or an Excel sheet, right? Some people like the old fashioned way. Let's just, go through and plug in the numbers through an Excel sheet. But whatever you're using, we want to have that system in place as a reference point. The next thing is going to be the automation factor. So now we have our awareness. How do we move to automating these things? Uh, a lot of times you can do that with your bank. You also have tools out there that are called robo advisors that you can use called Wealthfront, Fidelity, or if you're somebody who works with an advisor, that's something that your advisor should be able to implement. I saw Jonathan raise his hand. Go ahead.
Uh, Derek, this has been great. I wanted to take a second to one pause and see if anybody had any questions up to this point, but also if you could kind of highlight and talk about why you suggest like using apps like Monarch or Copilot to visualize that. What's the benefit of that, and how does that make a difference in how you actualize some of the things that you've already talked about?
Yeah, yeah, great question. The biggest thing is where we spend our money is a direct reflection of what we value. So it's when you use a budgeting tool that visualizes, that shows you where you're putting your money, that's showing you where your values are as of today. Okay. Now, I think it may be different than what we say we value. Okay. So let's say I value wealth or, being financially independent. I value time with my family. I value, um, experiences, right? Going out of the country and things like that. But when you start getting into a budgeting tool that tracks your expenses, uh, and I can speak personally, I can tell you my family, based on where we spend money, values Chick-fil-A. Like we value some Chick-fil-A, like it's up there, for a quick snack. Um, it allows you to see where is my money going and is that in alignment with my actual beliefs, and if they are unaligned, they give you direct feedback in showing you how you are aligning them over time, right? How you are saying, okay, well, let's say I value wealth building. Well, my savings has gone up, right? I went from saving you know, $250 to $500. Like it can show you that you're making updates. And that's the biggest, I think that's one of the biggest indicators because if we're flying blind, right, and we don't know where our money's going, right, then we don't know how to make adjustments either. Right. We'll just be kind of basing it off feeling and touch. Right. But that won't necessarily lead to a system. Does that help, Jonathan?
No, it definitely does. And you know, and as somebody who's recently gotten Copilot to kind of do some of these things off of my Microsoft, off of my struggling to use Excel, I will tell you it makes a tremendous difference in just being able to see it quickly, analyze it. I almost feel like I'm a financial advisor or something like that. Like when I'm looking at it now, I might not know what to do with it after I look at it, but at least I know where my money is going.
Yeah, that's the first step. That's the first step. I think, they've made it technology has made it very possible, to cover a lot of the things that it takes to build the foundation of wealth. Okay. Um, so, so yeah, that's why I think, getting a budget, I think that's like step one is how do we get aware? Then step two is moving it to automation. And step three will be right implementing the long-term wealth options, right? So if at your employer, if they're using Fidelity, Empower, Capital Group, like that's their 401k vehicles or HSAs, like making sure that we're plugged into those because those are very easy for us to implement and low-hanging fruit from a system standpoint. Any other questions? Okay, I'm on. Okay, so I saw in the chat. Are there any other questions, Jonathan?
No, I think you can keep going.
Okay. Then, so now that we have the systems that we're putting in place, I think now this is going to be more of the perception, right? The perception and some of the mental things that we have to change is what do we associate with money? A lot of times when we're looking at money, the faces that pop up in my head are Warren Buffett, you know, Jeff Bezos, Elon, Mark Cuban, right? And all these people are associated with being smart, right? And I think sometimes we might be short-sighting like what money actually means because we've all been in a situation where we've been out with some friends or maybe we were on a date in high school or something and we spent way more than we expected just because the flow of the night, right? And you didn't do that because you made a bad decision. You did that because you were having a good time. So I think if we can switch from thinking that this is a smart thing, right, and it's more of a preparation thing, in saying that we just need to be prepared for the feelings that we're going to experience. We know we're going to feel like we want to travel, right? We know that we're going to feel like we want to do something nice. Okay, well, let's just create a plan for it, right? Um, I know that I feel like I'm going to need to support my family. Great, let's plan for it, right? The feelings are the things that are going to drive the use of the money, right? The better that we can control those feelings and plan for them, the better decisions we can make. Um, Also, it's looking at, I call this like the algorithm versus real life. If we look at just the way life occurs, if I just looked at my life or I looked at some of my clients' life, earlier in life, let's say in my 20s, I didn't have a lot of money. I had a lot of energy. I had a lot of time, and I had a lot of attention to direct towards things, right? Now, let's say I'm married and I have three kids, and a little bit further in my career, I got more money, but I got less energy. I got way less time, and my attention needs to go get directed to a lot of different spaces. So as that occurs, if we wake up and you could be working and being successful in your career for 10, 20 years and wake up and say, man, like I feel like I haven't moved, I haven't gone anywhere financially, really, or maybe I haven't reached the spaces I thought I would. And it's not because you made the wrong thing, it's just this is the way life happens, right? Our money may go up, but our energy, time, and attention may go down. Um, and then meanwhile, you got the algorithm showing you like, hey, like life is this perfect straight line, but this is really what life is. It feels like a big old storm that we gotta again unwind and put some systems around. Man. So that's what leads me to, I won't say our last slide, but I think this is our last slide on the psychology and perception. You got to give yourself some more grace. You got to be willing to continue to try again. There was a book I read. Um, there was a book I read by Dr. William Lee. It was called Eat to Beat Your Diet. Okay. And in there, he did a study that showed a person that never dieted versus a person that yo-yo dieted. Now, I don't know if anybody knows what yo-yo dieting is, but yo-yo dieting is like you get on a diet for 6 weeks, you lose a lot of weight, and then you gain weight back, right? And then you go through this yo-yo throughout time. And what the study showed is the person that did the yo-yo dieting, even though they were gaining the weight back, they still were a healthier individual than the person that never chose to diet. And what that spoke to me, and what I think other people need to hear is we just got to be willing to get back on the horse. Will you save and will this be perfect? Probably not, right? Like life is going to happen. We might need to make adjustments, but we have to be willing to get back on the horse. And the faster we can get back on it, the better we can get moving in the right direction. Or the faster we can get moving in the right direction. Sorry about okay, and this is the last. Okay, the value alignment loop, kind of like what I was talking to Jonathan about before. Where your money's going is just a direct reflection of where your values are. Our goal is to put those values in alignment. So having your cash flow curiosity slash budgeting tool, right? And becoming aware of where your values at today based on what you're doing and start making moves towards the values that you actually want to implement. Those are the things that we want to do. And that's what this system helps do. So understanding what are the tools that are there that we can use after we put together our goal, what's the system we can implement, and then the perception change of okay, this isn't about a smart thing. This is just, I need to control. Let's plan for the emotional things that may come up throughout the course of a year, right? We understand that we probably don't have a lot of time to make this correction, and if it's not perfect, let's get back on the horse, right? We know the tools, we know the systems. Let's get back on the horse, okay? So if you're walking out of today with action items, and let's say you're starting from zero, okay. What will put you on the path of wealth building wealth? Step one would be download an app or a tool for your budgeting tool. Okay. Step two would be opening a savings account or high yield savings. Step three would be automating the an amount of money that if you're starting off, if it's $10, I don't if it's $10 or if it's $10,000, right? Like start with something that you wouldn't feel. And sometimes the way I think about that is I think about how many times I go out to eat in a week, right? How many times do I let 20 to $30 go out of my hand? You know, well, okay, if that's the case, $20, $30 a week, it's 80, $100 a month. That could be a good place to start. Boom. Um, step four would be then make sure you're contributing your match to your 401k. I think that's always a great place to start. And then step five would be schedule a quarterly review meeting with yourself to review and adjust. Uh, Making sure you have time on the calendar to actually come back and review this plan, review your systems. Uh, it is honestly probably going to be one of the best parts of it because once you see it moving in the right direction, that's going to give you the emotion, right? Of like, oh man, like it's working, you know? Um, and even sometimes visualize what next year could look like. Sometimes I sit with my clients and I'll have all these numbers up and we'll say, okay, this is how much you're going to save, but it won't resonate until we sit down and say, okay, this year, right now, you got X amount of dollars. So let's say, I'm just going to use a scenario. Let's say you got $10,000 in savings, right? And we need to get to 50. Okay. I say, okay, imagine we wake up a year or 2 years from now. You've put 3% into your 401k, right? Your expenses haven't really drastically changed, and you wake up and you got $50,000 in your bank account. How would you feel? I don't know, man, that would feel good. Okay, great. Now here's the system that we need to implement in order to reach that space. Jonathan, I see you got your hand.
Thanks, Derek. From a governance perspective, um, you know, talk a little, if you could talk a little bit about what am I looking for? So now I've gotten my tool that, now I see everything, so I know where my money is going. What are some just general things that I should be looking at other than that, maybe on the tool? And what are some questions that I might ask myself to transition into like maybe that next step from a beginner standpoint?
Yeah, I think on that quarterly review, and this may be phase two, if this is the foundation, this will be like phase two, like what's the next thing? So if you go back to that graph where I had those tools, right? And I had them broken down to 1 to 5, 5 to 10, 10-year plus goals. Imagine if you sat down and you had asked yourself, where am I at today? Where do I want to be 1 to 5 years from now? Where am I at today? Where do I want to be 5 to 10 years from now? Where am I at today? Where do I want to be 10 plus years from now? Or when achieving retirement? And then attach those answers to those goals, right? So you say, okay, 5 to 10, 1 to 5 years from now, I want to have a new house and I want to have my 3 to 6 months of savings. Okay. 5 to 10 years, I want to have the ability to go buy an investment property. And then like 10 years from now, I want to be on track for retirement. During that quarterly review, I would sit down, I'd look at that budgeting tool, and I'd say, okay, that's your system, right? Like that's your process. Okay, based on the system right now, I have money going towards my 401k. I have money going towards my savings, and I've got some money going into this housing fund. Check. Great. 10 years from now, I want to be in a position to have a property. I opened a brokerage account that I'm funding. Okay, I'm working towards that. Check. And then 10 years from now, I got my 401k and we're saving. Okay. Now, what I would say is, am I on track for that? A lot of times, a lot of these 401k plans, if you log in, they'll show you how much income you're estimated to have, once you retire. So you can use that as a reference point. Okay. Now, what I would say is at some point in time, what ends up happening when this is becoming really successful is people start wondering, well, what can I do with the rest of this money? Or what's some tax mitigation strategies? Or what other tools are out there that are available? And there are other tools and there are other strategies out there. But I think, like you said, from a beginning standpoint, if you're sitting down, you're setting those quarterly reviews, you're going through that checklist of saying, okay, am I still working or on track towards these goals? And then also, be mindful that life is going to happen in between each quarter, right? So you're going to have to make an adjustment. So what adjustment do I need to make? Or what's something, or what's a stumbling block that maybe happened during that time? Um, I'll wrap this. One thing that I like to do with clients when we're going through like their budgeting tool is you can break the tool down into like, okay, how much did you spend? Like how much came in this year, how much was spent? And you look at it on a yearly standpoint. Then you can break it down quarterly. Then you can break it down monthly. The reason why I do that is oftentimes we have rhythms of expenses. So if you got kids, it's like, okay, I know I'm gonna have to go buy uniforms and school supplies probably in August, or a little bit early August. Um, right? Like that's something we can plan for, right? During your quarterly review. But you'll start uncovering that during these reviews. You're like, man, every time I get to August, it's like, man, we can't save as much. Well, why is that? Oh, then you start taking notes. Well, the kids start school. Okay. Then you get to December and you're like, okay, we got holidays, we got Thanksgiving, we got Christmas. Okay. So understand like as you're implementing these tools and systems, you're going to have to make adjustments. The goal is we want to get to the point where uh, we're not necessarily changing how much we save each quarter, right? But we're having something that's that we don't have to change. What's the surplus that we don't have to change ongoing? Then, as the year progresses, let's say we get bonuses in March, right? February, March, we get bonuses. We got the tax return coming in. Now we plan, okay, we're going to throw a little bit extra, in these months on top of the savings to help, speed up that wealth building process. Does that help?
No, that's great. Thank you.
Um, so that's the conclusion of our of what we have for you today. Wanted to open it up, wanted to open it up to you all. If there were questions or things that stood out, would love to field those questions. If you have any, I would say more personal questions, we are offering a free complimentary session to everybody on this call. Just feel free to scan the QR code below. But thank you guys for your time. Hopefully it's been helpful for you all. Look forward to answering some questions.
Thanks, Derrick. I'll open the floor up. Uh, and would love to just hear, for those of you who may, I imagine we're all probably in different parts of this process. Would love to hear maybe if some of you have things that you have found out that have worked, whether those are tools or just just a philosophy, or would love to hear some of those things, or something that you learned today that you're going to think a little bit more about, as you go throughout your financial journey. Feel free to just come off mute and just share. We got a question in the chat. Thank you, Althea. Um, Althea's question is, what advice would you give to teens looking to start saving and building wealth, uh, before they begin working, even in a part-time situation?
To teens?
Teens, yes.
Oh, okay. For teens, I think it's going to be based on what are their goals, what's out there. So it's kind of asking that question, in the 1 to 5, 5 to 10 or 10 plus years, like where do you want to be? And what I would say is like layer it. Of course, investing is going to be so important. I think, that's one of the things that when you look at Warren Buffett's wealth, again, this was written in the book, The Psychology of Money. I think at the time he was writing a book like it was like I think Warren Buffett was worth like 8 billion or something like that. But what they said was of that amount, seven billion of it came after he was 50. And what it spoke to was the importance of compound interest, because he had been investing since he was a teenager. Now, of course, he bought and sold company. He was doing a couple of different things to get his return as well. But the importance is if you can start investing as soon as possible, and don't touch it. You're pretty much. I mean, I won't say guaranteed, but you're taking a great step towards building wealth. But for a teenager, just depending on their situation, are they paying for college? Are they going to college? Or do they want a car? You know, is this something they want to put away maybe for buying a house? Those are the things that I think would be good questions. And I always would say it's not bad to kind of fund each area. So I think when I was a teenager, I was, sweeping hair in barbershops, cutting yards, and then I got a job at Subway. And let's say my Subway check was like $200 or $300 a month. Right. If that was this kid's situation, I would tell him probably, just based on what his goals, if I had like a rough estimate, I would say, hey man, like save $100, put it in cash or high yield savings, put $100 up into a brokerage account. And then, since he doesn't have income, he can't necessarily open a Roth IRA or something, but uh, I would tell him to then create something that he's probably not going to touch until he's 50 or 60, and just have that automated from a savings standpoint. That way he's building up options. So if he wakes up 4 years from now, he'd have um what, $4,800. He had $4,800 in cash. He had $4,800 invested in a brokerage account, and he had $4,800 that'll continue to work for him for the next 20 years. So that would kind of be one way I would think about it.
Thank you for that, Derek. And one of the things that is Derek and I kind of had this conversation about what this would look like is understanding that there are probably a multitude of things that you can learn in this type of a conversation. So one of the things we're going to do is this is part one of a conversation, and we're going to have Derek come back to kind of dive into kind of the next step of what this looks like from a knowledge-based perspective, but also just getting used to just practicing and having and given an opportunity to kind of sign up for some of these tools and to kind of think through this a little bit more. Because, one of the things that comes up often in a question that I ask is, hey, I went to college because they said that's why I need to go to be able to make money. Back in the old days before everybody just could be an entrepreneur or whatever, whatnot, or just watch YouTube. Then I got into it. Now I'm like, all right, now what am I supposed to do, right? Like now I'm here, what am I supposed to do? So now understanding and kind of taking that to the next level of some of these conversations is what we're hoping to do by being able to record this, sharing it with our peers, with family members or people who might be of interest in like recognizing some of these things and being able to kind of grow on some of the opportunities that may be in front of them. So this will be on all of our chamber stuff. We'll put it on chamber YouTube and things of that nature. So be on the lookout for that. Um, and again, we appreciate Derek for having his hand. Derek, your hands raised, so go right ahead.
Yeah. I was just say, just looking at the call, I think the only other thing I'll probably bring up, and again, I think this may be a part of like option two, would be like employer stock options, right? Like if you're somebody that has employer stock options, like that's something depending on what your vesting schedule may look like, That's something that definitely has some unique planning, ramifications around it, and how to optimize it. So what I would say is kind of to Jonathan's point, like this is kind of, the first stage of planning. Step two is where you kind of get into more of the attractive things when you're talking about investing or employee stock options and tax mitigation strategies. Like that, those are where those things get implemented, but those things are null and void if the foundation's not laid, because we'll just have to rip them up if the foundation's not there. So I just wanted to share that.
For sure. Thank you, Derrick. And in addition to obviously, Derrick is a resource. You might have other resources that you can go to. I also want to shout out the City of Tulsa's Financial Empowerment Center. They are doing some really great work over there about with also being a resource for some of these same types of conversations and decisions and just knowledge. What we want to do is make sure that everyone has the access to the knowledge to be able to be successful for whatever those goals are, right? Whatever those goals are. And the last thing that I'll add as far as this conversation goes, and thank you, Lexi, for putting that on the chat. The last thing I say is again to Derek's point, this doesn't have to feel like such a heavy conversation all the time. Nobody wants to work extremely hard to not have fun stuff to do with their money, whether that's supporting the Packers, like our good colleague Althea, or I recognized that hey, I had to put a budget allocation for shoes in my budget because I was spending it, but I wasn't tracking it. So therefore I needed to do that in order to make sure that I was being smart about how to do it, right? So it's not that you can't have fun, but we also want to make sure that we're just being smart and knowledgeable about these things. So again, we thank everybody for joining us today. I want to give one more shout out to all of our community development sponsors. We appreciate their support and being able to provide information like this. And you all enjoy your Wednesday. Thank you so much.